will get started. Let me just walk you through the dynamics for the panel. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started with this session. My name is Diana Paez, and I am a Senior Director for Energy and Electric Mobility at the William Davidson Institute at the University of Michigan. It's really great to be here today moderating this session focused on electric mobility and strategies for transforming public transport management. I'm going to invite you in a little trip. We're going to go to 4 different cities to understand some of the ways in which electric mobility has been contributing to transforming urban mobility and transport systems. We're going to learn about 4 case studies, and then we are going to talk to and discuss with ADB colleagues who play important roles in the types of projects we're going to be learning about. So the session will include provide an overview of some of those latest e-mobility projects, including innovative financing perspectives and approaches, such as results-based lending. So there will be some practical learning for some of the other participants and DMCs interested in these types of projects, as well as highlighting gender inclusivity, just transition principles, and private sector participation in these projects as well. We want to get to implementation strategies, some of the challenges, some of the opportunities, and then we're going to try really hard to have some time for questions and answers as well. So with that being said, I would like to invite our first speaker to come please on stage to present the case of the Toshbus transformation strategy. And this is Mr. Nodir Khudayberdiyev from the Ministry of Transport of Uzbekistan. Nodir, please. Thank you very much. And just very briefly, Nodir is project manager at the Ministry of Transport of Uzbekistan, leading the accelerating investments in low-emission vehicles in Tashkent project with UNDP and GEF. He has more than 15 years of experience in public transport regulation, sustainable mobility, and transport digitalization. So we're really excited to hear from his experience.
Thank you, Deanna, for your kind invitation. Good morning, everybody. Well, first of all, I would like to thank ADB for the invitation and giving the opportunity to participate and share the insights from Uzbekistan. Today, I would like to present about the recent work conducted with the support of ADB regarding the strategy, regarding the document for the transformation of the Tashkent bus company, the major company which provides passenger transportation services in Tashkent, in the capital of Uzbekistan. I would like to start with the overall progress in e-mobility sector in Uzbekistan. At present, Uzbekistan is making steady progress in advancing e-mobility across the country. Some of you may be already familiar with the information which was given by me from the previous ADB events. But however, the figures here are updated, and it is always a pleasure to share the information if there will be an opportunity. So there are currently more than 730 electric buses operating nationwide, of which approximately 520 are already in service in Tashkent. And it is planned that by 2030, 50% of the public transport fleet in Tashkent will be electric, which implies the procurement of an additional 500 electric buses over the next 4 years. As you can see, nowadays, the 25% of all public transport fleet in Tashkent is electric, and we are aiming to increase this rate, this level, up to 50% in the next 4 years. This is in Tashkent. But other cities of Uzbekistan as well, like such as Samarkand, Andijan, Nukuz, are also procuring and showing an interest, especially what is notably is that the interest is showing by the private sector as well. Without government intervention, private sector are making rational decisions and calculating, making a feasibility studies, and now they are procuring electric buses by themselves. I know the cases where at least 3 public transport operators, which are private, are signing a contract with Chinese manufacturers, and in the next few years they will be procured at least 300 electric buses with the private investments without government intervention. Which is important here, government made first steps. Government showcased that the electric buses are beneficial, electric buses are environmental friendly, economical, and then with showing a pilot projects. And now it's up to private sector in Uzbekistan to invest. Besides public transport fleet electrification, there are also a big interest from the households. Now the people are very interested to purchase electric vehicles, 4-seat electric vehicles instead of traditional internal combustion engines. For instance, in Tashkent, almost every second newly registered vehicles are electric. Every second, almost every second. But it is in Tashkent. Well, other cities are a little bit slowly in introducing electric vehicles. Now, in Uzbekistan, more than 100,000 electric vehicles are already registered in the country, which makes the share of electric vehicles around 6% from the total vehicle amount in the country. So now I'm going to go to the transportation strategy itself. So in the recent months, we have conducted work regarding the transformation strategy of the Tashkent Bus Company. And we understand that the effective management of the public transport operator is particularly important, especially in the context of deploying a large fleet of electric buses. To maintain the financial sustainability of the public transport operator, it is essential to optimize operations and strengthen the management effectiveness. Tashkent has already passed a structural tipping point over the past 5 years. Private transport declined from 33% to 73% to 36%, while public transport increased to 63% of all trips. At the same time, demand is already growing faster than the infrastructure, and operational capacity, creating a structural gap between demand and supply. Tosh Shahar Transmat, this is the original name of Tashkent Bus Company in Tashkent, is the core urban bus operator, providing nearly 99% of all public ground transport services in Tashkent. In recent years, the company has achieved significant operational scale. For instance, more than 2,000 buses, 8 depots, and 163 routes. Demand is expected to more than double by 2030, with around 146% growth in the realistic scenario. Without adjustment, this will not only reduce service quality, but also increase fiscal pressure. The company starts from a strong base. As I said, 99% of market share and relatively young fleet. However, constraints like low urban speed and limited flexibility create room for high impact improvements. Based on the analysis, we developed 7 alternative business model scenarios covering different combinations of contract structures, revenue streams, and level market liberalization. The process led to the selection of the most balanced feasible configuration, a hybrid diversified model of the urban transport operator. This model aligns with existing institutional constraints, enables demand monetization, and provides a foundation for sustainable growth and financing. In other words, this is not only the optimal model, this is the only model that both implementable and economically viable under current conditions. Recently, a few years ago, government of Uzbekistan introduced a new model of financing public transport operators. It's called so-called gross cost contract, where the public transport operators remunerated according to their performance, according to the mileage that they run, and that gave an opportunity for public transport operators to invest, to be confident, to lower the risks, to invest to the electric bus fleet. So I think this is one of the important points to be mentioned. The strategy focuses on quality, infrastructure, and decarbonization. Importantly, the climate is embedded into the business model. And the expected results of the strategy go well beyond operational improvements. Following the implementation of the proposed initiatives, we project that more than 90 million in additional revenue, approximately 170 million in additional EBITDA, and a net profit margin of around 23%. Importantly, these results are not driven solely by volume growth, but primarily by proper monetization of demand and the elimination of existing institutional and operational inefficiencies. This fundamentally changes the economic logic of the system, from the model dependent on public subsidies to one capable of generating its own returns. As a result, the project evolves into a bankable investment case with predictable cash flows and improved credit profile and the capacity to attract long-term financing. The program is also structured as a phased implementation roadmap, where some initiatives deliver short-term impact with limited capital requirements, others require infrastructure investments, and certain measures depend on institutional and regulatory changes. As such, the strategy is not simply a list of initiatives, but a structured transformation program and investment pipeline, delivering both short-term gains and long-term sustainability and scalability. I think it's not working. Ah, yes. I'm going to skip the slide in the interest of time. In the context of the role of the Asian Development Bank, extends beyond traditional financing and becomes central to shaping the overall project architecture. The partnership can be structured across several complementary pillars. First, structuring PPP models, including concepts such as fleet as a service and charging as a service. This is particularly critical for capital-intensive investments in fleet renewal and infrastructure expansion. Second, co-financing and support for infrastructure development, including green depots, energy storage system, and grid upgrades. Third, development of green financing framework and support in accessing capital markets. Fourth, climate resilience and adaptation. ADB can support it with the development of resilience standards, implementation of MRV systems, climate proofing of infrastructure. And finally, knowledge sharing and regional replication. Tashkent Bus Company can serve as a pilot case and knowledge hub within the CAREC region, supporting replication development of best practices and regional capacity building. Overall, this is not one of financing opportunity, but long-term strategic partnership with ADB, acting as a financial institution and strategic partner. We are at the point where the concept is fully validated and by analysis and financial modeling. The next step is to move from strategy to constructing concrete investment solutions across PPP, climate finance, and infrastructure development. We are ready to move forward together with ADB. With this, I'm finishing my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nodir. That was very interesting. I would like to next invite our next speaker, Deepo Kurnaen, Vice President for Corporate Strategy and New Business Development at Damri, who has over 20 years of turning complexity into clarity across public transport, television, finance, mining, and more. Deepo bridges the gap between strategic vision and real-world results, has a lot of expertise in corporate finance, financial modeling, M&A, and stakeholder alignment. And he's going to talk to us about Damri's project on results-based lending for e-mobility deployment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Diana, for the brief introduction. Good morning, everybody. I know you've all had a long week, so please bear with us during the session. Hopefully we can have something fruitful to take back with us to our home countries. So today I was actually asked to talk about results-based lending and Damri's experience actually about the benefits and how we come about to propose and get this result-based lending to finance Damri's electric bus project in Indonesia. Okay, so before I start my presentation, I think I'd like to start with a story about two fishermen. These two fishermen were very good friends, by the way, and they actually wanted to buy a new engine for their ship. One took a traditional loan. He paid up front, and he started the installments, but when the waves were so high, he couldn't go fishing, but he still had to pay the installments to the banks. His second friend made a deal. He said, just pay me for the fish I catch. He gained success because when he delivered the fish, then the banks paid him, and there was no upfront capital expenses, and that's how this relates to the results-based lending, which is provided by ADB. Now, to put into context of Damri, we've actually started our e-bus projects since 2021, where we have evaluated several and very many brands of electric buses, and ramping up in 2023, and up until 2026 now, we have 316 buses operating and supporting 5 provinces for BEBs across Indonesia. This number is still quite small, and we hope to ramp it up significantly later, and especially with the help of the RBL from ADB, we can expand to a more larger number in the near future. So actually, what is an RBL? It's defined as a financial modality where disbursement is linked to achieving verified results, not upfront costs. Different from a traditional loan, the disbursement is made based on invoices and procurement. The disbursement of RBL is based on outputs and outcomes. For example, the kilometers driven, the passengers carried, CO2 saved, or the bus uptime. Now, the key for Damri is that it pays you after you deliver a measurable e-mobility service. That's the key point of the RBL. And why the Damri's challenges and opportunities faced is the high upfront capex for battery electric buses versus the diesel, and uncertain residual value of the batteries, because batteries can take up a 40 to 50% cost of the bus. There's also a revenue risk and tariffs fixed by Transjakarta, but the operational costs are still volatile. However, this brings also opportunities that we have to replace aging diesel fleet in Transjakarta corridors to meet Indonesia's 2030 e-bus target of 10,000 units, which was set about 10 years ago, I think, and now it's going to be reviewed. And also the longer term total cost of ownership after 5 to 8 years of operations. So this is basically how the RBL mechanism works, is that in the first phase, Damri procures the BEB charging infrastructure, no disbursement yet. However, there is an option for us to have an upfront drawdown of maximum 25% of the RBL limit. Then Damri operates the buses for Transjakarta and is verified by a third party. Once the results are verified, that the 100 e-buses are deployed, or the kilometers are driven, or the CO2 has been saved, then ADB disburses based on the verified results. Thus, the funds will reimburse Damri's capex and opex. Now, when we talk about RBL, this is the heart of the RBL, which is the disbursement link indicators, which are basically indicators that define what is actually measured, the output, the outcome, units, how it's counted, target, and disbursement amount linked to the DLI. Now, mitigating investment risk with the RBL is where conventional lending fails because it finances a risky asset or the bus, while RBL succeeds because it finances a guaranteed outcome or the service itself. As you can see in the table, this is in Damri's case, the RBL disbursement takes about 17 months to fully disburse. However, the expenditures are fully disbursed within 11 months. Now, RBL shifts the focus from buying a bus into buying a guaranteed transport service. What Damri is excited about is that this will link the cash flow to a performance measure which matches the repayment with actual revenue from the Transjakarta. And it reduces the upfront debt burden, so no need for full capex at the loan start. And also incentivizes for operational excellence, which means better maintenance equals more results, and more results equals more disbursement. It also increases Damri's ESG rating, having a green credential, and also it's very technology neutral, where even Damri can switch battery or tech providers as long as the results are met. As a brief comparison between traditional debt and RBL, for the traditional loan, the disbursement trigger is purchase order, and interest rates can come up to 9 to 11%. There is also collateral required, which is the bus fleet and land. There are also default and asset seizures for penalty, underperformance, and low alignment with Transjakarta revenue. Different from the RBL is verified, the disbursement is based on verified e-kilometers or CO2 saved, and lower interest rates. No collateral is required, lower disbursement as part of the penalty for underperformance, but no default, and higher alignment with Transjakarta revenue. There are 3 important documents I'd like to explain just very briefly. Within the RBL, 3 very important documents. One is the program implementation document. This is who's doing what, when it's going to be done, the PICs, everything related to the project. The second is the design monitoring framework, which consolidates what results, what outputs, outcomes are expected from this program. This is measured through results chain, performance indicators, data source, reporting mechanism, risk, and everything, and so on. And the last and final most important document is the disbursement link indicators document, which is a set of indicators which will be used to disburse the RBL on the program. I think as a conclusion, RBL transforms Damri from a borrower into a service-based partner, and it solves the pay upfront, earn later problem of PUBs. And this success requires bridge finance, better risk transfer, and real-time verification. And ADB have provided the technical assistance to set up these result indicators and verificator framework. I think if I can close with a closing statement is that the results-based lending does not truly eliminate the risk. It rewards for performance. For Damri, for Transjakarta, and for the people of Jakarta. That is the difference between a loan and a legacy. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Tipo, for that wonderful presentation. Next, I'd like to invite our third presenter, Ms. Sveta Harosian, who is the program lead for the Yerevan Urban Development in Armenia and is going to present the e-mobility project Emerge. Please join us. Ms. Harosian is a public finance and investment management expert with over 30 years of experience in government and development projects. As I mentioned, she currently serves as the head of public investment programs at the Yerevan Urban Development PIU, and she worked previously in the Ministry of Finance of the Republic of Armenia. Thank you. Please join us.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to present Armenia's emerging electric mobility initiative, a transformation urban transport project aimed at reshaping public transport in Yerevan through sustainable, low-carbon, and people-centered mobility solutions. Like many rapidly growing cities, Yerevan is facing increasing urban mobility pressures. Our public transport fleet has historically relied on aging diesel vehicles, creating high operational costs, congestion, and environmental impacts. At the same time, citizens expect faster, safer, cleaner, and more comfortable mobility. Another important challenge is that public transport often operation is the same congested traffic as private vehicles, reducing effectiveness and reliability. This creates a clearer need for system modernization rather than isolated improvements. The key challenge is not simply transport modernization. It is creating a people-centered urban mobility ecosystem. For Yerevan, electric mobility is not only transport reform, it is also climate, public health, and urban development strategy. Electric buses can scientifically reduce emissions and noisy population while improving energy efficiency and operational sustainability. For citizens, this means cleaner air, quieter streets, and a healthier urban environment. For the city administration, it means a long-term investment in resilient infrastructure and reduced dependency of fossil fuel. That is why we say e-mobility as a foundation for future urban transformation. Our vision is to build a modern, inclusive, and climate-resilient transport system. The project is not limited to replacing buses. It is designed to improve the overall quality of urban life. We aim to create cleaner streets, more accessible mobility, reduced environmental footprint, and a more efficient and attractive public transport network. Accessibility and inclusiveness are especially important priorities for us. The total The total project budget is approximately 255 million US dollars. The project is supported through a strong partnership model involving the Asian Development Bank, the Green Climate Fund, and the government of Armenia. The implementation period is planned for 4 years. This is one of the largest urban mobility transformation initiatives currently under preparation in the region. The project includes several integrated components. First, procurement up to 215 articulate electric buses. Second, modernization of 2 depots to support electric operation and charging systems. Third, development of dedicated transport infrastructure, including priority bus corridors. And additional important components is urban greening with up to 213 hectares of urban parks areas. And finally, institutional strengthening through technical assistance, training, and capacity building. This integrated approach is essential because electric mobility is not only about vehicles, it requires ecosystem transformation. This slide summarizes the transition we aim to achieve. The expected result is a faster, cleaner, and more reliable transport network. Public transport should become the preferred mobility option, not the last option. Depot modernization is a critical technical prerequisite for successful e-bus operation. This is one of most operationally sensitive components of the project. We also see mobility and urban environment as interconnected. The project therefore integrates urban greening and public space improvements alongside transport investment. The environmental benefits are substantial. The project is expected to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, air population, and urban noise levels. This contributes directly to Armenia's climate commitments and support low-carbon urban development pathways. For Yerevan, environmental sustainability is becoming an increasingly urgent urban priority. The project also delivers strong social benefits. Mobility reform is about improving quality of life for citizens. From an economic perspective, the project is expected to improve operational efficiency and reduce fuel dependency. Sustainable mobility investments are also productivity investments. The project is strongly aligned with Armenia's climate goals, nationally determined contribution, sustainable development goals, and broader green urban development strategies. This alignment is important because sustainable mobility requires coordination between transport, climate, and urban development policies. The implementation roadmap follows a fast approach. Currently, the project is in the preparation and approval stage. A fast model helps reduce implementation risks and improve institutional readiness. As with any major infrastructure initiative, there are implementation risks. Risk management is an essential part of successful project delivery. The project has already been submitted to the Ministry of Finance of Armenia. Following the review process, it will proceed to the Prime Minister Public Investment Committee. At the same time, technical preparation and coordination with development partners are continuing. We are currently transitioning from preparation toward implementation readiness. The initiative also has broader regional importance. We hope Yerevan can contribute to regional dialogue on sustainable urban transformation. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sveta, and thank you to everyone for your attention to these different case studies. I will now next invite our final speaker in terms of the 4 cases that we will be learning about today, Ms. Ajar Baisalova, who is an ADB consultant with over 10 years of experience in policy making for environmental projects and stakeholder engagement. Ajar has worked at Bishkek's mayor's office implementing urban development projects, as well as electric transport and urban mobility as a consultant for ADB. And she will be talking about the case of introducing 120 electric buses in Bishkek in Kyrgyzstan, including talking about the business model that was followed for this particular case. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, my name is Ajar Baisalova. I'm the consultant of Asian Development Bank and want to tell you about our project. I wanted to say that we had really little project because I have feeling little concern when I participate such kind of big forums when you are feeling you're too little. But for the end of this week, I see that yes, we are a little bit, we are small, but we are on trend, and we are doing our best. And let's see what we have done. So Bishkek is the capital of Kyrgyz Republic. Kyrgyz Republic is 7 million country in Central Asia, in very center of the Asia, and we love to call ourselves Switzerland of the Central Asia, because you see we are really green, we have beautiful mountains, and of course our cities are growing, and we have our own challenges. For example, transport issue. Okay, so after the Soviet Union, we had really old infrastructure and no public transport. So when you don't have the public transport that can provide it from municipality or government, so private organizations are deploying them by themselves. So that is why we had these minibuses that we had them a lot, and they all were private. And you can see that this traffic jam. And but okay, after for the last 5 years, I guess our municipality doing their best, and we have a lot reformed implemented. And for now, we don't have the minibuses. We have new CNG buses, but they are CNG. Okay, we replaced our minibuses with CNG buses. More than 1,500 CNG buses now are on the roads, replaced these minibuses. And another photo I added just recently, because this photo was done 2 days before. You see that even with this, we have traffic in some streets. This is the center, and you can see that emergency cars cannot go and help to the citizens because of this traffic jam. So a lot of issues just because of traffic. And this picture is just to show you how our roads are designed. We have the pedestrian zone, something about 3 meters, and then line for, we call it personal mobility devices, but actually it's for all scooters, bicycle infrastructure, and others. And it's not separate, you see, so also a bit dangerous. And then we have this green buffer, and then just roadway for the cars. And by the perspective, you can see that unfortunately, our policy is working that we are cutting this green buffer to do the roads wider. Okay, I guess it's the similar, I mean, the simple scenario for a lot of cities. So that is why we had, so I didn't add here the slide about the air pollution because I wanted to show you how beautiful our city, but the previous session was about air quality, so I want to say it anyway. We have really big air quality issue because of the, even we have these beautiful mountains, we have temperature inversion, especially in winter time, and this project also burned because of the air quality issue. Because one of the sources is transport, and we have like PM 2.5 in winter time because of coal using, but from transport we have the emissions, NOx, for whole like year. And one of the so sources is transport, so that is why we, supported by Asian Development Bank, we started the project in Bishkek for electrification, urban transport electrification project. We have like 4 components of this project. First is depot. We have 2 new depots from old infrastructure, and 120 buses. Third is green corridor, and 4 is of course institutional capacity building. And also about the previous session about the low emission zones. So green corridor is not low emission zone, but kind of, and I believe that it can be the beginning of the such initiatives and activities. So let's look more about each component. About 120 e-buses, they are fleeting and fleet and with charging infrastructure, right? So this is the first electrobuses, and all others, how I said before, are on CNG, but people and citizens for whom we are working, right, are saying about that e-buses are the best and they really love it. It's about stakeholder engagement. And 12 meters e-buses are going through the city with this 3 years spare parts and maintenance plan, of course, and other maintenance like tow vehicles and others. Second is e-bus depot. So it is new. We constructed it in the 2 parts of the city, in east and west part of the city. So we can buses can have these routes easily with enough charging, enough charged routes, and like long routes from one part of the city to another. So these depots are professional repair and maintenance area, so it's really good, and municipalities trying to use these depots for other facilities and for other vehicles also. Electra, hope so. Third, green corridor, mobility corridor. So you can see the design of this corridor. We try to keep this green buffer, green pocket, we call it, and then, of course, separate bicycle infrastructure, and just 1 and 2 lines for cars, and separate line for the for buses, for our electric buses and other public transport. So now we have just finished the detail engineering design, and it's ready for construct. So we hope next year we will start to work on it. Here is a bit little video. Yeah, with sound. You can see about green corridor. Kiev Street is the center of the city, also from east to west, connected to one big market that is located in the west, and a lot of trading malls are on the way by this green corridor. So we hope that it's also the economical, we will have the economical benefits from the green corridor, because a lot of markets, cafes, offices are there and will just increase. So you see the bus stops that will use the solar panels. Yes, so separate spaces for cars, for bicycle, and for pedestrian. And by the DD, we keep all the trees, of course. And we try to have a wider place for pedestrian. As I said, it can be, of course, one of the future pedestrian, more maybe low emission zones in Bishkek, and it will be the first case in Kyrgyzstan that we can then after have like more zones like this. So the green corridor is 3.7 kilometers, and as I said, it's the first such kind of initiative in Bishkek. And also I wanted to mention that previous session was about the low emission zones, and one really good comment was, if you design good like opportunity for the citizens and they will love it, so then it is success. You can multiply this case. But if it's not, so you don't have any other chance. So that is why I think it's like big question for us to do it really best and comfortable for people, for safety, and comfortable for citizens. So again, a bit some vendors from the of the green corridor. And okay, the first component is about system management, and it's more about institutional development and capacity building. But also, if we are saying about the transforming transport system, so I wanted to say about the system management and operation, how it's work now and what are we going to support. For example, now we have e-ticketing called Tulpar, and this is the one of the questions where municipality is asking to support them. So for now, a lot like public transport in e-buses and others using this e-ticket. And of course, a lot of benefits from this. We eliminate the share of cash flows and other leakage. Also, cost optimization through green electrobuses. It is significant reduction of the fuel, of course, and not just from our e-buses, but also others. And of course, environmental impact, right? Another areas where we are supporting by the last component 4 is intelligent traffic management system. we have in activities started by the mayor's office, but also we need to support them in data-driven management in urban traffic and also in real-time monitoring and everything to reduce the traffic. And third, on digitalization, municipality already have the platform. You can also use it in mobile phone called My City, Мой город, if it's in Russian. And all the transport services integrated into this mobile app. And passengers can see where the bus is coming and just should they wait or not. And then of course, this is data, right? Data that we can use for decision making. And this is the areas where ADB is going to support the municipality on digitalization, in intelligent traffic management system, in e-ticketing, and also in parking management, but it's under discussion. And what I wanted to say, we are in the final stage of the implementing this project in Bishkek, and also it was the good case for another additional financing supported by Green Climate Fund in another city in the really east of the Kyrgyzstan, called city called Karakol. We have also the picture, you can see that we have really beautiful mountains there. Of course, we have like a lot of snow, but even with this, we have lack of public transport. So that is why a new project we are starting in Karakol. Karakol is popular with his ski base. A lot of tourists are coming in winter time, and of course, of the Issyk-Kul Lake in summertime. So this city has strong potential for developing like eco-friendly tourist destination. And if we provide sustainable urban mobility and really good electric buses, so it is a big opportunity for this city, and not just for Kyrgyzstan, but the whole region. And good public transport, safe, green public transport, other like urban mobility, pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure can provide and support tourism, accessibility, and this environmental sustainability for the city. So yes, thank you. Here's my contact, and I wanted to say that I hope everyone will return to your home countries with to implement your projects, but inspired by this forum, and I wish just maybe one or two little ideas that you can keep in your mind and implement in your cities. So I think it will have a big impact. Okay, so thank you for all, and wish you good luck. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ajar. I do think it was very inspiring, and it was really cool to see the video also in action and to visualize what's possible. I think we've had 4 very, very rich and diverse experiences here from the 4 cities, so I would like to take a few minutes to open it up for questions and answers from you all in the audience. So I'd like to invite our 4 speakers to come back and join me here on stage just for a few minutes, please. Nodir, Sveta, Ajar, Deepo, please. Thank you. And for you all, please prepare your questions. Think about if you have anything, any follow-ups based on what you heard today, questions or reactions, as well as insights that might be useful for others in the audience as well. We'll have a few minutes for that. And yeah, can you hear me okay? Yes, it's fine. So while you are thinking about whether you have some questions, I just wanted to thank each of you for sharing each of your experiences. I learned a lot from the 4 cases, and I think it was really interesting to see some of the common threads of transformation for urban mobility projects. So starting with Toshbus and thinking about that growth in revenue and how this entity and all of the changes that you've done inside, right, internally are actually reflecting in your growth and in becoming more of a bankable project as well. And then Deepo really learning about RBLs and how that has changed in your case as well in Jakarta, the way you were doing things before, and then from traditional loans to RBL, and highlighting some of those particular benefits as well and differences. And Sveta with the Emerge project too, supported by ADB. I love that you touched on the urban ecosystem and how the entire ecosystem is needed, having the human and the citizen right at the center of that transformation. And regardless of the scale, and I love Ajar that you said, you know, it's a little project, but it really isn't, because I think a lot of those transformations sometimes start small, right? And yet it touches, and it will touch so many aspects of the city. And I think it's really great to see that vision coming into reality and hearing about those lessons as well, regardless of the scale and the time that it takes sometimes to have those projects take off. So are there any questions to our speakers, or anybody would like to share a reaction to what you heard today? Yes, please, and you may just, there are a few microphones there.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Tia. I'm from Indonesia. I would like to maybe ask the question to Armenia project, because it's just started. And I just want to share a little bit what haven't been solved yet, since we already started in 2021, and in 23 we hit the road with the electric bus. There are things that we learned a little bit hard way. That's when people talk about the sustainable transport, mostly we talk about how it's become green, how to be green, how to be greener. But actually, after we go through that process, actually, when we make the electric mobility, it's not about the green mobility, but also it's about energy management. So you have to have very smart backup. Like in Indonesia, we have different rate in the morning and in the evening. On the other hand, we have to work 24/7. So I think it has to be designed very well, because our population is so big. So we carry like 1.4 million customer per day. So I think the energy management should be there, especially the risk for the residual value of the battery. It has to be calculated and designed since the beginning, which we learned it hard way. Because you know what happened when we buy combustion bus, the cost is like half or 1/2 of the electric bus. But the component of the cost of the electric bus itself, the 50 to 60% is about the battery. So when the residual time, when the depreciation, the battery gone, actually the bus mean nothing. So, and how we do about that used battery itself, I think we have to start discuss about that. Some people have idea, maybe we can make it like mini power plant or whatever, but it has to be calculated and it has to be designed, and the risk has to be shared with the government. Let's say if they can provide the operator with a guarantee, because what you call sustainable is the operator financially has to be sustained. The operator in operation way has to be sustained, and also the environment. And for the public itself, it has to go beyond the technical terms, because at the end of the day, customers are human being. Human
Yep.
being like to be served nicely, friendly. Uh, Actually, in the infrastructure of the transportation, why we have to different with the airport, I mean in the land transport, I think in the airport, it's more nice, it's more, I think it has to be implied in the land transport.
So,
And the last one
mhm.
is the rebranding of public transport, urban public transport, because the rebranding is very important. Right now in Indonesia, public transport sounds like meant to be for the second class uh, citizen.
Citizen,
So,
the narrative around it.
yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So that's why I think we have to work together to
Mhm.
make that this public transport can be used by everybody and good enough for everybody, and the service management for everybody is the same. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tia, for highlighting so the battery risk, and I know that came up in your presentation, Deepo, as well as the integration with energy management. And I know, Sveta, you mentioned working with the utilities specifically to handle that. Would either of you like to comment briefly on the? You're fine. Oh, yes, please.
If I may share the experience of Uzbekistan in our country, Tashkent, when the Tashkent Bus Company were procured 300 electric buses, it was in the contract, it was reflected the requirements, the agreement between the manufacturer and the company, that if the battery will degrade less than 80% in the next 8 years, the company manufacturer will change it, will replace the battery by its own expenses without no charge for the company, for the public trans operator. So that was the first case. And in the second procurement of 200 electric buses, now they a little bit changed the contract, and now the manufacturer will replace the batteries after 8 years of operation, even if there would be no degradation. Just after 8 years, the manufacturer will change it and install it the new one, and take the old battery to China and will dispose it. So in case of our country is like that. So as another way, another solve, I can say that the Shenzhen and Santiago, Chile has introduced new models of procuring the electric buses, where they procuring the electric buses separately from the batteries. So for the battery, they have another contract, and for that they are giving the battery responsibility to the battery manufacturer, say procuring it in the model of charging as a service model. So with this, in procuring electric buses, it is very beneficial to diversify the risks to many parties. Thank you.
Can I add just one point? I just wanted to put across that Ibu Setia mentioned about the high peak load factor, peak load, and normal load electric tariff. I think this is where there may become a mismatch between when the buses have to charge and when the electricity tariff is higher. So I think this is a message actually to the governments that can help to have a certain tariff, electricity tariff, for public e-mobility, which is different from the peak and normal tariffs of electricity, because there is a mismatch when we don't calculate the energy load factor of the corridor. We only calculate the cost per kilometer, and this is where sometimes when we have to charge during the peak hours, it really destroys the financial sustainability of the project. And that's what we have to consider when we develop a project for the e-buses in the future, I think. Thank you.
Thank you so much for highlighting that as well. Okay. If there are no other questions, I would like to ask you. Oh, there is one. Okay, there's an opportunity. We have time for one last question for this panel. Yes, please.
Good morning. I'm Jessica from Manila. I'd just like to know if you can share with us your latest project to improve the public transport for persons with disabilities like me.
Anybody would like to comment on that, Ajar?
Actually, our 120 buses, e-buses, are with they like should pass through all safeguards and due diligence, and it's not about the people with disabilities, but also with mom with strollers and elder people. So it is the requirement actually, and also when we design the green corridor or bus stops, it is also the requirement to do for all citizens.
Thank you for that question, and thank you, Ajar. And I think that's actually a great segue into the next and last block of this session. But for now, I'd like to ask you to join me in thanking the 4 speakers with the experiences they shared today. Thank you very, very much. And next, I'd like to invite 3 of our ADB colleagues who will be talking about some of the key elements of ADB support to projects such as the ones we just learned about to join me on stage too, and I will introduce each of them. So we have Brendan Coleman, Low Carbon Solutions Specialist with the ADB Transport Sector, joining us here. And Brendan supports the design and implementation of climate mitigation projects, as well as technical assistance for ADB developing member countries. Thank you, Brendan. Also, Abhishek Hedged, Senior Private Sector Development at ADB, who works closely with developing member countries in South Asia to develop innovative financing approaches to address SDG financing gaps, create market-based mechanisms to support economic growth, and guide reforms to commercialize sovereign enterprises. Thank you for joining us, Abhishek. And last but not least, Claire Sharamnak, Social Development Specialist focused on gender and development in the Climate Change and Sustainable Development Department at ADB. Claire focuses on gender and transport, health, and women's leadership, and she has over a decade of experience in gender mainstreaming and implementing programs with a focus on women and girls. Thank you, Claire, for joining us too. And so we're going to take this opportunity, as I mentioned, to talk about some of the aspects related to the projects and the support that ADB provides to the different countries, but I need my notes here, so coming back for them. And we wanted to have this discussion to complement the previous presentations with the different cases. And I think some of the topics that we're going to talk about came up during the presentations, thinking through all of the different aspects of urban mobility and focusing on some of the changes, some of the lessons. I like that they really highlighted both what's needed internally, but also some of the benefits in doing things differently. And so to connect a little bit with the work of ADB and share more about your work, I'd like to ask you a few questions and then also open it up for questions from the audience. And perhaps we'll start with Brendan, and to talk about a little bit more. We talk about a lot inclusion, the importance of inclusion, the importance of thinking through the different groups that are and must be included, right? When we think about urban mobility projects, certainly with electric mobility. And so we'd call this concept of just transition, of thinking about in which ways and with using what approaches we can ensure that the transitions that we are right now working on will be just. So I'd like to ask you to talk about what those types of issues or implications related to just transition look like for ADB.
Thank you, Diana. So thank you. This is, I mean, a really important question. And, you know, often we frame the transition to e-mobility as merely a technology shift, right? Going from diesel to electric, but really particularly in developing country contexts, we really need to frame it much more as a system transformation. And that's where just transition becomes critical. So if we think about the baseline challenges that public transport faces. We can see that there are particular structural constraints in the sector. So high upfront capital costs, e-buses are 2 to 3 times more expensive than conventional ICE vehicles. We often see operators that are informal, small-scale owner-operators in sort of informal systems, and that often leads to limited access to finance. So really, if we're transitioning to e-mobility, we're favouring here capitalised players. There's a risk here that we are enforcing a sort of big players coming in, driving out previous operators. So yeah, high informality, often through these informal associations that also drive competition and also inefficient systems and a weak coordination. And so here we also see that we have this inefficiencies don't support the e-mobility transition, so there needs to be a move to more formal systems. And a weak public service orientation, of course, as well. So often profit-driven, we don't have that public service obligation on planned networks and focusing on access and affordability. So, the issue here is really around not just decarbonisation, but who participates in the future system. And we can sort of see how we address this in an example of an ADB project, the Sustainable Urban Electric Mobility Project in Nepal, where we're helping to transition to e-buses. And so there's a strong government push here for e-mobility, surplus hydropower that's looking for a productive use. There are fuel import burdens and FX pressures. Again, rising congestion and inefficiencies that are affecting livelihoods, particularly, and also barriers that are really impacting the opportunities for regional growth. So the system's already under stress, declining profitability, particularly post-COVID. This is driving increasing competition on profitable routes, declining access, and worsening service quality. But on the other side, the demand side insights, we're seeing that passengers are willing to pay more, but they want clean, reliable, and safe services, especially for women. So the transition starts from a weak and fragmented baseline. And so we need to have a dual transition of a technology transition, but a transition from an informal to a formalized system. And the risk is if we're taking a pure corporatization approach, we're excluding existing operators. So here, the ADB approach, working with our partners, we're designing an inclusive transition model. And this is really focused around integrating informal operators, establishing a special purpose vehicle, a legal framework by which operators can opt into. The existing operators then transition into the new system by contributing paid-in capital, and there's a sort of flexibility in how that can be achieved. They can convert scrappage fees to an equity share of that SPV, and basically then this enables wide participation across the operator base. So small and single vehicle owners can then join. It avoids the system being dominated by a few large players, and it also makes the model financeable. So the SPV becomes a central operating entity. It owns the e-buses, it administrates the staff contracts, and it collects revenues. And so this creates a balance sheet, predictable cash flow, and allows access to finance to these small operators. And then, of course, these operators are supported through concessional finance. The ADB can route through a financial intermediary using blended financing, and it removes that barrier of high upfront cost. The income model as well is supported, so there's a management fee that will be received by the operators. It gives them stable income, and then there's a dividend share at the end of the year to incentivize efficiency. And then this is all tied together with institutional support to develop a public transit authority that then ensures and oversees that public service obligation of the new system. So just the final point, the goal is really not just to lower emissions, but to really transition to a system that's cleaner, more inclusive and more sustainable than one it replaces, and supporting good quality jobs, livelihoods, while capturing those environmental benefits that we've been discussing today. So thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. Thank you. And I think you highlighted the systems lens, which is I believe the only way to really understand the impacts to different types of different people, different communities, right? To really ask those questions about who might be excluded through this approach, this particular approach to a transition, and what is that impact. So in this case, I love the example you talked about in Nepal with informal to formal, and immediately the thing that comes to mind is finance, right? Like how can you actually work through that? So it's great to hear about ADB's inclusive transition model and thinking through some of the key challenges there to ensure that the different stakeholders can be included. Thanks for sharing that. And actually, I'd like to come to Claire next, because Claire, you're focused on gender considerations in the transport sector, and we're just talking about thinking about some of those constituencies that might, again, be underserved or underrepresented. And I know that gender is incredibly important for ADB. There's been guidance regarding how to mainstream gender, I think that from like 15 years ago now, but it will be really great to hear about how you go about integrating gender considerations in the transport projects, what has changed, perhaps what challenges remain, and how are you approaching them?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. So, I mean, I think we know the challenges that are in front of us in terms of the amount of funding and financing needed that we need to invest in infrastructure in the region, which I think is about 1.7 trillion every year until 2030 if we want the region to maintain growth and tackle poverty and respond effectively to climate change. So this represents an opportunity for us to really say, how can we build inclusive transportation systems that respond to women and girls' needs and increase their access to markets, to employment, to health services and education. So the Gender Equality Division at ADB, we actually released a new toolkit because 15 years is a long time and a lot has changed, as you've said. And what we wanted to do is really capitalize on this opportunity that I'm talking about to say, how can we put forward a transformative gender equality agenda? This is what the UN says under SDG 5. Now, what does that actually mean? Because that's quite jargon that we use in the gender equality sector, right? It's how can we support transport and gender specialists to promote gender equality considerations in the transport sector, looking at moving beyond, I think, what we have been doing for the past 10 to 15 years, which we have started to increase, looking at gender responsive infrastructure, looking at how we design, for example, e-buses and depots to ensure that women can access them equally, taking into account, for example, their care responsibilities, right? Looking at people with disabilities, women with disabilities, and how they can access these. But we want to move towards things that are more structural, such as how do we address, for example, gender-based violence and sexual harassment in the public transportation system, which we know is a major issue in every public transportation system around the world. We've not been able to eliminate that, unfortunately, anywhere in the world, and I think every woman in this room can tell you having had that experience, unfortunately. But also looking at how we can encourage women's participation in the sector, both in decision-making, leadership, and technical roles. The figures are still quite dismal for the transportation sector. It's about 12% of women employed in the transportation sector, so we have a long way to go. And then, of course, looking at what are the policy and legal reforms that need to be in place to remove barriers for women's employment in the sector, which still exist in a few countries in the region. So when we updated the toolkit, I mean, we had to recognize all these different aspects that need all the considerations and cross-cutting themes, things like looking at the impact of climate change. We know heat stress, for example, has differential impacts on women. That's very important in the transportation sector. Looking at other priority issues like disability inclusion. And so we have, we wanted to incorporate that, and we have, more knowledge products around that as well. But really, how we look at how to integrate this, I think we have to start with, what do we want to achieve? What are our gender equality outcomes for e-mobility projects, right? So there are things like increasing female ridership. That, of course, depends on the context that you're working in. In some places, women are actually are the vast majority of those taking public transportation, right, because of the fact that they don't have access to private vehicles, for example, and it's much easier for them to use public transportation. In other contexts, it's much lower. Looking at how we can improve their experience whilst in public transportation, knowing that a lot of times women have no choice but to take public transportation despite the fact that it's very unsafe for them. Looking at increasing the representation of women, as I've mentioned previously, because the more women we have in the sector, the better we are able to design transportation systems that respond to women's needs, right? And improving economic outcomes for women, right, in the sector. So how do we do that? I'll just do that quickly. One is the importance of collecting, using, and reporting on sex, age, and disability disaggregated data. We do this very infrequently across the transportation system. It's not easy to do. We are starting to have the technology through AI, right, to be able to introduce and to think through how do we do this. In some countries and cities, they've started doing this with, for example, tagging of payment cards, to understand gender tagging of payment cards, to understand how many female passengers do you have versus male passengers. As part of the GCF-funded and ADB managed e-mobility program, we're actually designing a multimodal transport pilot survey in Armenia that's going to gather information about, exactly doing surveys for women taking the e-bus. So men and women, what are their destinations, their waiting times, their means of transportation, affordability, safety, so that understanding that at the beginning of the process so that it can influence the design process of the transportation system is very critical, right? And so we hope to roll out that survey in other countries under the program as well, so we can understand cross-regionally, where do we see similarities, where do we see differences, and how can we have best practices to address this. I've mentioned briefly the importance of gender-responsive physical infrastructure, operations, and services. Again, we cannot think about how we do, routes and fees and structures if we don't have an understanding of who the user is. And so that's how that connection is so important to sex, age, and disability disaggregated data. But the figure I mentioned, around 12% of women in the transport sector, we can't move the needle on that until we have gender inclusive organizations, right? Transportation agencies and ministries and organizations and private sector operators that have organizational structures and capacities to move women, to first get women into the sector, to move them from unskilled to skilled. And we know that, how do we get more women to be e-bus drivers, for example? We're working with Damri on this in terms of understanding that one of the biggest barriers is actually them having the driving license to take it on. It costs money that women do not have. So how can we start removing those barriers? Because we hear that that's one of the major barriers. It's not necessarily that they don't want to do it, is that they don't have the resources to be able to do it. I want to end on saying that, the framework in which we do all this is very important too. When we're thinking about the mobility plans that are anchoring, a lot of these transportation projects, the policies, they also need to be gender responsive to account for all of the factors I just mentioned here around mobility, employment, and safety, right? And I want to maybe end on safety to say, that is also extremely critical in terms of how do we ensure that we have survivor-centered prevention and response mechanisms in our, e-mobility projects, that we know that that's something that is going to carry through as an issue throughout any transportation project. And so what are, the training that's needed for bus drivers, for example, for transportation staff, frontline staff, on how to respond and address this. This helps ensure that we are achieving the outcomes that I mentioned around increased ridership of women, also increased employment of women in the sector. So it's all very much tied together. And I think that, I've mentioned just some entry points that we are starting across ADB finance projects, but of course we want to continue and have throughout the e-mobility sector.
Thank you, Claire. That was a great example of also mentioning Damri and specifically those barriers, right? Because if we don't know what the barrier is, and I imagine, of course, this will be different in different places, even in different regions within the same country, to increase women as users, as workers, as leaders. Why not, right? In the transport sector, because as you said, the more women in the room, the more gender responsive, hopefully, those policies and the deployment of this also new technologies can be. So that's a really, really important aspect of ADB's work. Thanks so much for sharing that. And last but not least, I'd like to come to Abhishek to understand a little bit more. So we've talked a lot about private sector participation and engagement. I think throughout the ADB Transport Forum, there's a lot of discussion around how to integrate even more with private sector approaches. And you work in the private sector department, so we'd love to please have you talk about what type of engagement are we seeing from private sector, specifically on e-mobility projects? What does that look like? And what's a little bit of that trend based on your work?
Sure. Thank you, Diana. Well, I think so the biggest question we get asked every time is, what is the value for money, in terms of private sector coming into the room, the activities which we do in, let's say, e-mobility space and others. And we see that, when it comes to new technology, yes, we need the private sector to deliver it, but at the price at which it is getting delivered. And today, the good part was almost all presentations covered a form of risk and a risk transfer, which is happening to the private sector in terms of managing the projects, in terms of, delivering the outcomes. Especially very happy to see the RBL project speak about how efficiency and quality has to be improved, with an understanding that this is something which the private sector shall help them deliver. So in terms of ADB's approach, it's across a wide spectrum. So we do it in 3 levels. One is what we call the upstream, and in the transport sector, let's say looking at reforms which will lead to a situation where the private sector sees value in participating in the value chain. This can be reforms which are at the tariff level, at the regulations level, and generally the institutional capacity to, tomorrow let private sector enter the country and play. Then what we call the midstream reforms, which we spoke very well about today, various examples where we want to have the institutions ready in terms of their capacity and the various models. I mean, the one example of inclusiveness of letting the small operators play along with the big operators is another example of how private sector development also brings in the informal sector along with the formal corporates. And then in the downstream, what we say is access to finance. So ideally where there are projects which are available, let's say there's a PPP project which is coming to play, but then there are no investors who want to take the financial risk. So we try and bring them in terms of, let's say, doing the financing on our own balance sheet. So ADB has done projects where we finance the project for a really long term as a patient impact investor, and try and, let's say, bring in, higher private sector participation. So in all these, let's say, stages of upstream, midstream, and downstream, one thing is very important is to have a demonstration effect. So that is to try and show the global investors, try and show the other players that, we are able to execute at least the first project, and then, the subsequent scale up is easy. So I would say it's again, coming back to the fact of how do we position the value for money? Have we, frankly, reached out to the right investors? And generally looking at, the post-investment phase. I think so a lot of risks, especially on the battery storage and others, got discussed today. So one aspect is to ensure that an investor's interest is also in a continued manner protected, including the financiers. So I stop at this in the interest of time, but if any questions, we'll be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abhishek. Yeah, thank you so much for highlighting those types of reforms that are also necessary and the various ways in which private sector can be engaged. I'd like to thank each of you for your contributions. I think that's very, very helpful to have a full picture of ADB's capabilities and how that this type of expertise can support and be integrated into transport projects as well. So please join me with a round of applause to our speakers, please. Thank you very much. And next, and for the very last part of this session, thank you very much for your patience. I'd like to introduce Bert Fabian, ADB Transport Senior Transport Specialist, who will provide some closing remarks based on this wonderful session. I think we learned from 4 very diverse and interesting cases that really show the potential for this type of projects, and then also from the ADB colleagues on 3 very important aspects of ADB operations. So thank you. Bert, please.
Thank you very much, Diana. Actually, I just want to take this opportunity to thank all the people and contributors. But the title of this session is Transforming Public Transport Management. I would like to thank our principal transport specialist, Arun, and our colleague, Glo, who really put this together. I hope you were able to look at the experiences and cases that were shared. These are actual projects supported by the Green Climate Fund and ADB in Indonesia, Kyrgyz Republic, Armenia, and Uzbekistan. I was in Bishkek. Some of the buses are already there. I saw it. There are a lot of electric vehicles already on the road. There are electric scooters on the road. They are going to do the Green Corridor. My colleague Arun, he is the one leading the project to expand it further to another city. So it's all going ahead. Our presenters from Indonesia, Dipo, and also the chairperson, Ibu Setia, who shared something about the battery. They have developed an innovative scheme together with ADB using a results-based lending scheme. So in ADB, we're also trying to see how we can make it more innovative to support the financing for the electric bus deployment. I hope you have also seen that many of these projects include integration of non-motorized transport in all of the projects. It's very good. We want to showcase this further. It is important to make sure that we are integrating the stations to where people will go next. And this is hopefully through these projects we're able to do this further. I would like to thank Diana Paez definitely for moderating this session. Thank you very much. We are in ADB working closely with the University of Michigan William Davidson Institute on these e-mobility issues, but some of those that were raised also, the jobs, the skills, the supply chains, it will also be important holistically in the issue of e-mobility. So thank you very much. Again, from our country representatives, the developing member countries, thank you very much. Arun, I'm not sure if you would like to say a few words, but please, if you stand up, I think you definitely, and Glo, deserve a hand. So thank you very much. For us in ADB, we will continue to support electric mobility issues projects through various funds within ADB, but also with the Global Environment Facility, the GCF I mentioned, and probably with others. Thank you.